This over here is balls to the wall Ryzen PC. Like, I mean, 5950X and RTX 3090 with 128 gigabytes of RAM, CL16, 3600 megahertz, like everything you want. This one over here is a lower end Ryzen Threadripper system. So we're rocking the 3960X 24 core processor, and we have an RTX 3070, but this one also has 128 gigabytes of RAM at 3200 megahertz and CL16. Now this one has quad channel, whereas this is just dual channel memory. But the question is, both of these systems are actually very similar price range now. Which one is better at real world live video editing playback? Let's find out.
If you're looking for a cheap Windows 10 OEM license, then look no further. Bobkeys.com is a website where you can purchase all sorts of keys and licenses for very affordable prices. With a Tech Notice discount, you'll be able to get the Windows 10 Pro license 25% off. To purchase the license, click on the link in the description or search for Windows 10 license on Bobkeys.com. Then add the product to the cart and press proceed checkout. Remember to add the 25% discount code and complete the order. Once you have the license key, click here, paste in the license, and you're all done. Check out bobkeys.com in the description below.
If you hear a little whirl in the background, it is the coil whine of both of these 1000 watt power supplies, and they're doing my head in right now. If you have any tips how to get rid of them, just please let me know in the comment section below. But I tested both of them, they do the same stuff, so now they're both here together. It's absolutely insane. Also, if you want to know the exact specs of both PCs and what parts we're using, check out the links below. I'm going to leave both of them there. Also, there's a video series on both of these PCs if you want to dig into more why we're building this, because these are very thought through builds for both of them and for a little bit of different purpose, so definitely check them out. So what we have over here then, we have two PCs. As you can see, I'm switching between them two PCs. So on these Premiere Pros, I've got loads of different codecs. So we're going to be running through different codecs and seeing how well do each of these playback, you know, this here. So just another tip over here, if you look in the very top corner, or like if you're wondering which one is which, then on the top over here you can see this is Threadripper, and if you go over here, then this one over here is Ryzen, so just so you know. Now let's have a look at Threadripper first then. So this is a Sony a7S III, this is 8-bit footage, and this is 420. Now 420 is very easy to play back, because it's hardware accelerated. So we're just going to do a timeline performance test over here. Full resolution, as you can see, we're playing it back, no problem at all. We're just going to press play as well. Plays back, no problem. This is 60 frames per second, so it's no problem playing it back, absolutely easy. Now let's have a look at the same thing on this 5950X or Ryzen system, and very similar play. Like, I don't see any difference at all. So Ryzen systems finished now. We have 6 frames dropped, and let's move on to Threadripper, and Threadripper dropped 16 frames. So in this test, looks like the 5950X is actually better in playbacking than this 8-bit 420 60 frames per second. Now I'm quite surprised that both of them actually dropped frames, because they shouldn't really. Now this is a 10-bit 420, and this is 24 frames per second. I'm just going to press play. Let's move on to this. This is 5950X, 24%. I don't know why it looks like this is playing back like in slow motion. Let's move back over here. I don't think any frames are going to be dropped over here. If you look at the Ryzen system, it looks like it's playing it back like in slow motion. So Threadripper finished, no frames dropped, and as you can see, the playback on this Threadripper system, very, very good, very smooth. Like nothing to say bad here. Ryzen, this one as well, finished it very well, no frames dropped, and the playback here is very, very similar. Like the timeline performance, very, very smooth. Let's move on to 10-bit 422 24 frames per second. Now this frames per second doesn't matter here so much, because I've got 24, 30 and 60 frames per second to show you, but this is 422, which isn't hardware accelerated. So we're just going to press play over here. Started very easily. Let's have a look here. I'll go home, start. Now this Ryzen took a little bit more time in order to start playing it back, but it still looks like it's playing it back, look, like in a slow motion, which is very, very odd. I don't know what the heck's going on here. So looking at this Threadripper system, we dropped 2 frames out of this 10-bit 422, and this is purely like CPU. As you can see, like GPU didn't do anything, but CPU was all the way maxed out over there. Now this is a 10-bit 422 60 frames per second timeline performance, full resolution. As you can see, it's not as smooth because it's all like accelerated through CPU. So if you want to play, or if your timeline is, you know, using this footage, it's best to use proxies or do some kind of ProRes files or render them out to a different file format, because now it's completely like doable and editable if you want to do it. You know, it's very, you press play. I think this Threadripper is a lot of like raw power to just literally chew through this footage. There's all these 24 cores, look at that, doing that. So it's not that bad. Now this is the Ryzen system, a 10-bit 422 timeline performance. Similar performance, although I do feel like somehow this is a little bit snappier, but this is a much louder here as well. I've got the PBO enabled over here because there was quite a bit of a performance boost when using this system, because there was, I think, quite a lot of thermal headroom, and yeah, look at that. 4.5 gigahertz all core boost. It feels like it's snappier. So now I'll go to 60 frames per second. Similar. It feels like this one is slightly better playback. I'm just gonna press play over here and then let it play, and we'll see how many frames we're dropping. But now on this 10-bit 422 60 frames per second, Threadripper dropped 20 frames. So let's have a look how our Ryzen is doing. So far, 31 frames. So yeah, playing back timeline performance, now the Threadripper actually won playing this back, because this is already more than what the Threadripper is, so we don't need to continue doing that. The Threadripper is better at playing back 422 footage, just more hard core power from the CPU. Not so much of the single core performance, but the multi-core performance is what we need from this Threadripper CPU. Now let's move on to something called Red Raw. Red Raw is a bit of a different codec. It's a little bit easier than 422 because it can be accelerated with GPU, because some of the stuff GPU does. So let's have a look at the timeline performance at first. Now this is unbelievably smooth. Very smooth. It's like as fast as I move the playhead, that's almost as fast as it plays back. So pressing play on the Threadripper, let's see what happens. And then now we're back on the 5950X. Okay, that is a lot smoother. This feels much smoother than on the Threadripper. So let's just press play. Look at that. It's playing back, 0 frames dropped. I don't know why it's looking like it's playing it back like in slow motion. Let's go back to the Threadripper system. Our Threadripper system dropped 80 frames at full resolution. It's very interesting. It's very weird to see that on Threadripper actually. Yeah, look at that. Our Ryzen system is like not sweating at all, and it's playing back 0 frames dropped. It looked like this was quite CPU heavy over here as well. As you can see, like all core boost. It looks like the GPU is doing a little bit, like 10%, 14% utilization, but CPU is doing most of it. And over here, GPU is not doing anything. So in this test, we can see that our Ryzen system was better than the Threadripper. Let's move on to a different codec. Now we are on the Threadripper system. This is 5K raw, Red Raw. Let's have a look at the timeline performance. Looks pretty all right. Let's just press play and see how many frames are we dropping. Drop 39 frames. Let's have a look at this Ryzen system. Okay, timeline performance is much smoother. Let's press play. So 0 frames dropped. I think the Ryzen system wins against Threadripper again, which is very interesting. Let's move on to a Blackmagic Raw 6K. And looking at the playback footage or timeline, it's very smooth. Now B-Raw is a much easier codec to edit with and play around with. As you can see, there is 34 gigabytes used on the RAM, which is interesting. Very smooth. These are 2 B-Raw on top of each other. There's 3 B-Raw 6Ks on top of each other. A very smooth playback. Let me just press play over here and let it play back. And then we're gonna go back to this Ryzen system. We have like similar, very, very smooth, not a problem over here. 2 B-Raw 6Ks playing back, no problem. 3 B-Raw 6Ks playing back, no problem. So I'm just gonna press play. Let's have a look what we're doing over here. Okay, let's move over here. Looks like it's playing back, no problem. Let's move on to this 2 B-Raws on top of each other. Plays back, no problem. Look, we're using not a lot of, even the CPU is not using all of it, so look at that. There's only 41% of the CPU usage. GPU is doing some of this, so it looks like there's quite a bit of headroom when working with this codec. Oh, looks like we actually dropped some frames over here. Let's have a look. Now going back to our Ryzen system. Ryzen system is, you know, playing it back, no problem here. So playing back 2 clips, no problem. 3 clips, no frames dropped. Full resolution 6K, playing back full resolution 6K. Okay, looks like the CPU is doing much more work on this Ryzen system. 0 frames dropped. And then over here, well, 0 frames dropped as well. So this is equal for B-Raw. Both of these systems are very, very good. Now let's move on to Red Raw 6K. It looks like the Red Raw is very CPU heavy codec. So playing this back, there is quite a good playback. No problem, time and performance is very, very good. I'm just gonna press play over here. See 6K, that's interesting. Like playing back this 6K RAW is much easier for this Threadripper system than playing back the 4K Red RAW, which is weird. See, 0 frames dropped. Let's go back over here. We've got the Red Raw 6K timeline performance. To be honest, it's a bit more choppy now here on the Ryzen system, which is very, very odd. Okay, now it's getting a bit better, but looked like the Threadripper was playing it back a bit easier. Let me go back to the Threadripper system because that's weird. No, going back to the Red Raw. Oh, look at that. Now playing back the Red Raw, suddenly the Threadripper system's like, yeah, I've got no problem with that. What on earth was going on? Was something running in the background that I didn't know about? But look at that. Now suddenly it plays back Red Raw 6K. Yeah, no problem as well. Red Raw 6K, that was no problem. So moving on to Red Raw 8K now. Okay, we're entering to the pro territory. People who work with 8K footage, Red Raw. So let's have a look how we are doing. First of all, let's have a look at this Ryzen. So timeline performance. By the way, this is full and this is not, there's no proxies on, just so you know. Look, I'll put this proxy on. So look at this timeline. That is amazing. For Ryzen 16 core system to play back 8K Red Raw like that, it's truly, truly impressive. Timeline performance is very good, even backwards. Look at that. Playing it forwards and backwards, that's very hard for the processor. I'm just gonna press play, let it run a little bit, and we're gonna go to this Threadripper system. Red Raw 8K, pull the proxies down here as well, so you know I'm not using any proxies. It's pretty good. Okay, now once it like gets moving, warms itself up, it's pretty good. The face over here, this is a little bit harder to play back than this fish. The fish plays back very easy, and then this motorbike plays back very easy, but looks like this, actually it's not too bad now. So I'm just gonna, very good playback performance. Let's have a look what we're doing over here. GPU, look at that, GPU is doing a lot of work. Our memory is only 22 gigabytes used. So let's just, in the beginning, press play. Let's go back to our Ryzen system. What did our Ryzen system? Played it back, 0 frames dropped, 8K raw red. Poof. Yeah, it was very much CPU and a little bit of GPU there as well. Utilization a bit less. See how our Threadripper is doing over here. Look, playing it back, no problem. No frames dropped. CPU is 100% at 4.1 gigahertz. This over here is Canon R5 8K sequence. And we're gonna start with full resolution. This codec is very, very hard to play back. It's like one of the choppiest I have experienced myself. So let's press play and see what happens. But first of all, timeline performance. It's a bit of a slideshow. Not as smooth as the previous ones, but considering what it is, it's pretty impressive actually. In the beginning, we're gonna press play. Thinking. Come on. Okay, then now starts playing back this chopness. This is no good. Let's move on to our Ryzen system. Full resolution at first. Similar type of feel. Very similar. Honestly, let's press play over here. We're thinking, and then starts playing back this choppy. CPU is absolutely maxed out because look at that, 61 gigabytes of RAM in use trying to play this back. That's quite some usage. Let's have a look if we try to play back this, how much. Oh, look at this, Threadripper is using 80 gigabytes of RAM. That's how you use all your memory up on Premiere Pro. Look at that, 80 gigs of RAM used, 63%. Let's have a look, and 61%. So it's interesting, even though they have the same RAM usage, the Ryzen is using less RAM than this Threadripper. I don't know why. And both of them have been set that the RAM usage is like 12 gigabytes for the other programs and as much on, you know, Premiere Pro as possible. So let's move it on to half resolution because I don't think you would be really editing like full resolution of this Canon R5 8K. And now it's pretty good. Like this playback now is very smooth. I would say it's smoother than the Sony 422 10-bit 4K footage. Was much more choppier than this 8K at half resolution. So let's press play. Let's see if it can play back half resolution. Still thinking. Okay, and now it's playing it back actually, no problem. There's a little bit of the thinking time. So I'll let it play back, let it play. Let's see how far it's gonna get. We're gonna go to Ryzen system, move this to half a resolution. Moving around. Now it's a bit more choppier than Threadripper. Threadripper felt a little bit better at half resolution and quite noticeably better. So let's press play and to see how well we're doing. Okay, see that? It's still doing choppy chop, whereas Threadripper was actually much smoother. Look, this doing some weird stuff over here. Even though it says it's 0 frames dropped, it's doing some kind of weird playback over here. And let's have a look. Our Threadripper finished at 7 frames dropped, which is very interesting. Let's have a look. How's our Ryzen system doing over here? 100% CPU utilization, 55 gigs of memory used. As you can see, the GPU is literally just idling there because literally the CPU can't do anything. But looking at this now, looks like this Ryzen system is actually doing a better job at playing it back. Look at that. At half resolution, this Ryzen system was actually better than our Threadripper. Threadripper is not far behind, but 7 frames dropped out of all this. But the timeline performance feels better on Threadripper. Like honestly, just the way it moves on the timeline, it's smoother than this Ryzen. And what we have next is this 12K sequence. This is B-Raw 12K from the, you know, Blackmagic Ursa 12K. Let's have a look at the full resolution playback of timeline performance. Okay, that is very smooth. Very impressive. There is a little bit of like choppiness here and there, but it's very impressive. Let's have a look what we utilization over here. Ooh, GPU is doing quite a lot actually. And our memory was, whoa, peaking somewhere over like close to 100 over there. So look at that. That is full resolution 12K playback, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, look, we were using about 90 gigs of RAM over there, which was very interesting. And GPU was utilized quite well as well. Let's see how well does our Ryzen system do. Full resolution. It feels a little bit more choppy than the Threadripper. Threadripper felt smoother. So yeah, GPU, CPU, Yeah, Threadripper one just feels smoother. Threadripper definitely feels smoother. It takes a little bit longer time for this Ryzen system to play it back. Threadripper is smoother. I reckon it's because of the quad channel memory. Now, don't quote me on that, but I reckon it is because, look, that is definitely smoother. Like the way I'm using it, the timeline performance, that is smoother. Okay, so let's try full resolution playback. Let's see what happens. This is 12K. Let's see how many frames I'll be dropping. Let's do the same on this Ryzen system. Bit of a slideshow for both of them. Oh, look at that. This Ryzen is, look at that. Is playing this part back quite smoothly. Look at that. At least it looks smooth. Okay, a bit choppy over here. Threadripper system dropped 427 frames. And let's see if the Ryzen can beat this 214. Wow. So the Ryzen Playback full resolution 12K, much better, which is interesting. It must be to do with something like a single core performance, because the multi-core performance is obviously much better on the Threadripper. I'm just going to put it to half resolution, see what happens then. So our Ryzen system at half resolution dropped 14 frames, and our Threadripper at half resolution dropped 5 frames. Okay, suddenly the tables have turned. If it's half resolution, the Threadripper is better at playing it back. If it's full resolution, the Ryzen is better at playing it back. So they're literally neck to neck, very equal contenders on both of them. Let's have a look at the exporting speed. Error of rendering. Oh no. Okay, so third time test. Looks like my Threadripper is just some of the maybe projects or something is corrupted somehow in the timeline where it just can't figure out why it can't like encode the 12K footage. But just look how much faster now the Threadripper does it. So this is the Threadripper. This is Ryzen. Threadripper is 40%, whereas Ryzen is still on 8%, 9%. Threadripper is already over 50%, 60% done. Okay, I'll put both of them on. So in the corner over there, we have the Threadripper system. Threadripper sister is almost done. Ryzen is now catching up a little bit, going a little faster. Finally got through that bit. That was the Canon 8K raw footage from the R5. That was the hard bit to encode, and Threadripper is done, whereas the Ryzen is still going. And that was hardware accelerated. So that means that if there was codecs in there that could be accelerated through the GPU, then that was on the GPU. But as you can see, wow, the Threadripper was much faster on this one. So let's have a look at another test now. This is now doing 6K exporting. So I'm not sure if this is actually like hardware accelerated or not. Looks like our CPU is doing most of the work. There's a little bit of GPU there, but let's see which one is faster. Okay, so this is much more neck to neck now. Ryzen is 37, Threadripper 40. Okay, I think the Threadripper is still gonna beat this out. Threadripper 77. Okay, very close now, 80%. Yeah, about 5% ahead is the Threadripper. Let's have a look. Is the Threadripper done? The Threadripper's done. And then now our Ryzen is done now. Okay, so look like the Threadripper is better at Blackmagic Raw export as well. So if you're doing that. Okay, so this is now Red Raw 4K export. Look at that. Our Ryzen might win this one. Let's have a look. Ryzen won this one. I'm gonna have to do this again. Flipping egg. This is crazy. Like Red Raw export is within seconds. And the same. Ryzen was faster on the Red Raw. 1, 2, go. This is a Sony A7S 8-bit 420 export now. So there is quite a bit of the same footage. So we're going to see which one's going to do better. It should be hardware accelerated. So if we look at here, yep, look at that, GPU is absolutely utilized. So with this one, I think the Ryzen should be faster. Whoa, they're literally the same. If I look at the 90% usage, so let's have a look. Ryzen is 56. Ooh, that is neck to neck. That is very interesting. Now these over here should be, let me pull up both of these. So looking at the Threadripper system, CPU is absolutely maxed out. GPU is 90%. whereas on the Ryzen we have CPU maxed out and GPU is 70%, 85, 90% now. I think they're gonna do it literally the same time. Let's have a look. Okay, like Ryzen was 0.5 second faster at doing this, so this is interesting. So now when the GPU could have been utilized, it looked like even then the 3070 kept up with the 3090 very well, and there wasn't that much of a difference in there. Okay, I know this has been a long video, but what is the conclusion then? So we have something that is absolutely high end of the consumer PCs really, and semi-pro, you know, platform, and then we have something that's like more professional, more PCIe lanes, you know, more cores, 4 channel memory. So which one is better for video editing? In terms of video editing performance, like really there isn't that much of a difference between those two. Now when it comes to some really CPU heavy rendering and stuff, the Ryzen Threadripper like jumps ahead. But when it comes to photo editing, for example, and some of the slightly threaded applications, then this Ryzen 3960x jumps ahead a bit better on here. So the question is, which one should you build? Well, here's like a few thoughts that I want you to consider. In this platform over here, there's no upgrade path available. That's as good as it can get. But for the same price, you could get something like this that has quite a big upgrade path. You can put more RAM in here, you can double the RAM if you want, you can have 256 gigabytes, which I don't know if you really need that for video editing, but you can put a better CPU in there if you wanted to, or if the Threadripper system, hopefully they're going to come for the same platform and you can use the same socket when that comes out, but it is possible. So if you're not doing so much more of photo editing, then I would lean towards the Threadripper. If your workflow is more like complex and using a lot of different codecs and maybe different programs, sometimes this, sometimes that, then I would go with this Ryzen system because it can do everything the Threadripper can as well as the photo editing. And maybe slightly slower in some of the CPU heavy, you know, maybe 8K or 6K renderings, but generally it can do everything else very well, and anything you throw at it, it's absolutely a beast of a machine. So let me know, which one would you get? Would you get a Ryzen or a Threadripper system if the price range is the same? So low-end Threadripper or high-end Ryzen? Let me know in the comment section below. Hit that like button, it actually makes a difference, believe it or not. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.